Welcome everybody to the Kazumatsuri Little Busters Book Club podcast once again. Today we're here for a bit of a different kind of podcast. We're not actually focusing on a specific route. This is the After-Refrain podcast. So what this is going to be, this is kind of like our intermission before we get into the EX routes, where we're going to look over all of the heroines and think about their stories with the context of Refrain and the Secret of the World. So if you haven't finished Little Busters Refrain yet, don't come in here. There's going to be heaps of spoilers. Also, we're going to talk about a few little extra things, including the Little Busters SS side stories and the Little Busters Ecstasy after stories, I think they were called.
I believe so, yes.
Yes. And we're talking about all those. We're going to be talking about Boku no Asa, which is like the epilogue for Refrain that was released as like a short story. And we're going to be talking about all the content that gets added to the base game after you finish Refrain. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but we should be blitzing through it pretty quickly, I expect. With that said, I'd like to introduce the cast. I'm Aspirety, and we also have Pepe.
Hello.
Naoki Saten.
Daijoubu.
And Grooven. I think we've all us four have kind of become the regular cast of these podcasts after a while. It just kind of worked out that way. So let's just jump right in. We don't have a 30-second recap to do today. We're going to go through the characters.
You want to recap the whole Little Busters?
In 30 seconds. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
But yeah, we have we're going to be doing each character by character. And I was going to do it in the book club order, but basically because the way these side stories worked out, we're going to do Kamari first. So let's start with Kamari.
That's fair.
She is a character that, well, for one thing, her route doesn't get any additional content after Refrain, as far as I'm aware. But she is a character whose story does become very significant in hindsight when you take into account the Secret of the World and all that. We talked a little bit about it in the Refrain podcast. There's stuff like the theming of her route being about changing a bad ending, and not accepting tragedy, but being able to move on from, it's basically about having hope, I suppose, in the midst of crisis,
right.
And all that stuff. It works very well into Refrain. I feel like, even though that was a Tonakawa route, I know a lot of people attribute Refrain to being Maida's creation, but I think you'll find that it was a group effort, and Tonakawa probably did have quite an active role in Refrain and piecing everything together. So you can definitely see a lot of through lines there from Kamari's route to Refrain. Helios in chat is mentioning there's also the stuff about the picture book.
There's a lot of synergy that the writers had, especially for Refrain. I think this was one of the works where a lot of them were very much on board about the whole world building of Little Busters.
Absolutely.
That's why the synergy of the character roots blend so well with Refrain. And Komari's route, I'd say, would be the most controversial in terms of theming, because on one hand, while you said it is about hope and about changing a bad ending, making the best out of what has happened. On the other hand, a lot of people might have counted that as trying to accept the bad things that happened, not shunning away and replacing it with something good, which is if you put that in the frame of Refrain, then it does get somewhat controversial. But I think you did mention this in the Komari podcast, Aspi, but I think the whole story that Komari wrote at the end of her route, in the epilogue of her route, I think that's really what they wanted to show, especially in the grand scheme of things.
It's a little bit confusing because in Komari's ending, by the end of the story, she kind of accepts that yes, death is a thing that happens, and it's a part of life, and you should enjoy life despite of it.
With respect to Kamari's route, there's a message here that you don't have to when someone close to you is lost, that doesn't have to be a sad ending, right? Because Kamari's life is going to continue on into the future. It's about like accepting that loss is a part of life, but also, you know, striving to make the best of the situation and, you know, move on.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong about wanting to make the effort of making a better ending.
You know, it could. I feel like you know, that could as easily be interpreted towards the it's enough ending. You know, having the characters just kind of accept it.
Well, we do know that it was Komari herself who put the most effort and had the deciding role in making a better ending to the entire story.
How so?
I think it's well, because of the whole Rin
Yes.
part.
Yeah.
Yes,
She's
Komari's
the
third
one that,
star, her
stayed
third
behind.
wish. She was the one who encouraged Rin to make a change.
It's really hard to say make a change today in the Key fandom. God damn it. That phrase has been ruined for
Don't
me.
think about it, Aspie.
Some people just don't know what we're talking about, and that's probably for the best. Moving on. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right? So, like, Kamari was the one that was, you know, pushing Rin. She believed in Rin being able to overcome this and surpass everyone's expectations there. I think it's pretty damn beautiful. I love that that's tied in all the way back to her root. Also, the fact that she's the only character that stays behind, I feel like that's something which isn't immediately obvious, but it becomes apparent.
Yeah, I think that's if we did not mention that before. In case you notice, like with the Love Hunters missions and pretty much any other route specific choice that involves other characters, any time you choose a character whose route you have completed, they are immediately unavailable, except for Komari, because she is always there.
Huh.
Yep.
Like, even with finding a roommate for Kud, I believe. If you... Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But if you, like, finish Mio route, then she cannot become Kud's roommate.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure
am I
if it's
wrong?
about roommate stuff.
Oh, no, yeah. It's
but,
about the scenes.
Well, she does appear in Kud's route if all the other girls, all the other roommate candidates are gone.
Yeah, that says the roommates do, like, get cancelled. You know, I have a theory about this.
Like there is
Yeah.
Because, like,
there is some kind of scene where Komari appears instead of someone else if there's no roommates available,
Yeah.
but I don't know what the exact conditions are or which scene that is.
So, like, it can seem a little bit counterintuitive then, because we actually do see the characters walking around, especially in the common route, even after their routes have ended. So it's like, well, they're still here. But
Yeah.
my theory for that, like, it's magic. I don't go to explain shit, but I'm going to try to anyway. Is that basically with the common route, it's just kind of like recycling old information. Like it's like a movie on repeat. And like
That is essentially what it is.
so like
Yeah.
basically you don't get anything new with that character after you've completed their route is the basic gist of how I imagine that to work in terms of the magic.
But what about Kick the Can?
Kick the can.
It's also recorded content.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which doesn't appear until you
Well,
finish.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That is a hole in my theory, and I'm not sure.
I'm
Because,
not-
like, I was going to say,
I'm not ready to discuss
I was going to say
this.
maybe it happened in the real world, but they weren't, like, a team in the real world. So I don't know.
I think it's just Kyosuke making up crazy shit. because Kyosuke does have a lot of
Yeah,
control.
it's-
Like he could
that's true.
essentially make quote unquote puppets.
Yeah.
Puppets.
I don't.
I don't-
NPCs.
NPC, yeah, there we go.
Like
I'm sorry.
everyone else except for the dreamers in
Yeah.
that world.
Yeah.
It's not that
Actually,
strange.
you know, we go back. This
sure.
is skipping ahead a bit, but if we go back to Kuragaya's route, you'll see that kind of like comes into effect where like the characters stop acting like themselves and start giving like
Yeah.
they start giving recycled responses to all of Riki's questions, and it becomes apparent that like, To me, that sounds like, their souls or their consciousness have departed, and they're just like, they've gone back to being an NPC.
Yeah.
If you reread Kurigaya's route, like, I think you'll notice the same thing.
Yeah. And
Okay.
And of course, having spent time with the rest of the characters, it becomes apparent that that is what they would do, even if they were giving generic responses. But despite that, Komari still stays behind, and I think we can attribute that exactly to what happens in her route. Because, I'm at this point, I'm sure that once their routes are finished, the dreamers become aware of what is happening to them, right?
Yeah.
And they become aware that they are on the brink of death, and that is why they are in the dream world. And Komari's route itself is about accepting death, and I think it's because she doesn't want what happened to her to happen to Rin.
Yeah.
Specifically Rin. And I believe that is why she decides to stay, because she ends up having a new regret, so to say, not being able to help Rin be prepared for this upcoming danger.
And there is evidence for this later in Kud's route, which we'll talk about soon.
Oh.
So, we also have the side stories. So, the first Little Busters SS was One Day Fine Day, which is a really neat, it's basically a prequel to the main story, where it's like, we don't know how long before the main story it is, but we know that this is before Kamari's really become acquainted with the Little Busters. And it's kind of just like Kamari just going around her day-to-day life, just interacting with each of the heroines and seeing how they're doing. And it's really cool. It just highlights the relationships they had before all this started. It's something we've never really seen before in proper detail. Kamari still goes to the rooftop and hangs out by herself, but she gets teased by Kurigaya, and she comments that Kurigaya sounds lonely. That's people mistake Kamari for a ditz, but she is so perceptive of other people. She's emotionally intelligent. Absolutely.
I think I read this short story a few years back, and I think this is what probably opened me up to being more appealed to Komari as a character. Because all this time I thought she was a little dumb,
Baby.
Sorry,
Baby
Komari.
girl.
Anyway, but it's because of this short story that you see that she isn't dumb. She knows what's happening, and she is self-aware. I think that's the most important thing in this short story. She knows when she starts, spouting nonsense, because as the story says, my brain is like a dam, and once it cracks, I just panic.
I think that was in Little Busters Kansatsu Nikki, which was the second story, where all the characters are teasing her.
It was also in the.
Oh, it might have been, but yeah, all the characters are teasing her, and she's very self-conscious about it. She's self-conscious about how she overreacts to everything.
Yeah.
And that makes her pray for Kurigai.
So it's this self-awareness that makes her very attuned to how the other characters are feeling. I don't think any other character has this sense of how do you say, emotional clairvoyance? No.
Clairvoyance? Yeah, she's...
It's like Kurugaya knows exactly what people are doing and what they're planning, whereas Komari knows exactly how people are feeling,
Like I said, she's very emotionally intelligent. She's very empathetic.
Yeah.
Kamari's great. And if you haven't listened to these short stories or read them, then I highly recommend it. They're a real treat. Little Busters Kansatsu Nikki was basically just
Komari being tricked.
Yeah, Kamari being tricked by Kurigaya. It's just pretty. It's just fluffy, but it's good fun. And then we have Shiase Hitotsu to Ao Tori. God, my pronunciation. One Happiness in the Bluebird. Which is
So One Happiness in the Bluebird is another short story where Komari is the protagonist, and basically she's just cleaning up her room, and then due to rearrangement, she notices that somehow she doesn't have enough stuffed toys. She
For her
needs
desk,
some
yeah.
more
Yeah.
to decorate it, because the ones she has now feel lonely. So she goes around and talks to other members of the
Mhm.
Little Busters
Right.
who try to help her.
And eventually they just end up hanging around and having fun.
Yeah, so much that Komari at some point just forgets about the whole issue and only remembers upon returning. But this story too has a happy ending. Patch, patch, patch.
Aw.
Who was it that found her penguin for her?
Yes, her blue penguin toy, thus
The classic.
the blue bird of happiness.
Yeah.
Now we kind of spoiled the ending.
I assume people who come in here have already read it. Is that a fair assumption?
Sure.
Okay, then. Yeah. This is a classic example of how Komari. I think I would say this is already Komari after her root, and it's a perfect example of how Komari has learned from the events of her root, how to turn this sad thing into a happy ending. Because if Mr. Penguin didn't get lost, then she wouldn't have had such a fun day with the rest of the girls.
Also, every ending will be a happy ending as long as her friends are looking out for her.
Oh.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
It's very subtle, but it does kind of hammer in all of the things that Komari has learned throughout the entire Little Busters story. It's nice. We'll spend a lot of
Should
time
we,
talking about Komari, so I think maybe it's time to move on to Mio. What were you going to say, Pepe? You going to say that?
Is it worth? I think it's also worth opening up the picture book that Komari was writing that Ricky ends up reading in common
Oh,
about
we didn't talk about that much, did we?
the little dwarves and their
Little
regrets.
dwarves.
You know, was it dwarves?
Yeah, it was.
So after you finish her out, you can in the common route you can end up reading a little story written by Komari about a bunch of little dwarves having regrets, and was it Mr. Penguin that goes around helping them?
I think so.
No, it's
No.
the boy and the girl.
Oh, it's the boy and the girl. Okay, it's the boy and the girl
Yeah.
that goes around helping them. And if you haven't noticed by now, that is essentially Little Busters. It is Ricky and Rin helping all of the characters who are at the brink of death
Right.
solve their regrets before
I said there was
they
there
pass
was no
on.
content added to her route, but this was added to the common route. So yeah, that's important to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is also a heavy hint if you reread common that she is very self-aware of what is happening.
Wasn't
after
this a
her.
book that Rin read in episode Rin?
Yes, she did. That exact book showed was for some reason lying on the table in the club room, and she looked through that.
I wonder why.
Well,
Wink,
so
wink.
that she realizes what's going on.
Yep. That's probably a
Komari is
little
a
hint
little
dropped in by
schemer.
Komari. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really cool that how a picture book was able to save Komari, then Komari does the same thing to save Rin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's good stuff. And I remember there was that line where it's someone once told me that I need to smile when things are sad. God, I can't remember the official quote.
Was it somebody once told me the world was...
No, Pepe. But yes, it is a happiness spiral. It goes from Riki to Komari, and then Komari to Rin, then Rin to everybody. And yay! Pachi, pachi, pachi.
That is the happiness spiral in action, in the biggest the biggest spiral you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. It isn't just a theory; it has huge ripple effects for the entire story. Really makes you think. Okay, well, let's move on to Mio. Mio Nishizono. She doesn't have any additional content after Refrain. But
She's very isolated.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think you're so right. Like this whole theme of isolation, and it really is like kind of the most isolated route in the game. Leo Kashida was the one who wrote it, and he didn't really do any of the other routes. He might have had a hand in Refrain, but yeah, like Mio was the main thing he wrote for Little Busters. And it may not have any new content, but going back to Mio's route after knowing the secret of the world does yield some interesting interpretations.
Well,
Oh my
for
God.
one thing, it
I'm so
makes
sorry.
for one thing it makes you realize that Midori wasn't, actually there,
Yeah.
and Mio didn't actually disappear, and every weird thing that happened was just a mechanism of the world to help her get over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting then that the world itself was able to grant her wish, if only for a brief time. It really had.
That's what the world was there for.
Yeah, but like it was a wish that couldn't possibly be granted in the real world, like
Yeah.
physically. It was something that could only
Right.
occur in a dream, and that's something that's kind of unique to Mio.
It's also something that needed to happen for her to actually get over. I'd say her regret is not being able to accept Midori as part of herself, and I think that's something that she needed to face Midori face to face to actually resolve, and the dream world was able to give that to her.
Yeah.
So that's all good.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think how like the dream world allowing her to meet Midori and then disappear. It was like it was everything she ever wanted
Yeah.
in a really sad way. And then basically, it's kind of funny when you think that Mio's route is basically about Riki undoing her wish. It's wild. But yeah, as you said, it all worked out. But let's talk about One Rainy Day, Aru Ame no Hi no Koto.
One Rainy Day was the third short story, only available in Busters SS. So this is about Riki just wondering what happens to Mio when it's raining, because obviously you can't sit under a tree while it's raining, and Mio
Oh,
just-
yes, you can.
yes you can, yes.
Depending on how determined you are.
Yeah, she just puts his theory. She just debunks his theory immediately. To quote her, it's if I wear a raincoat and spread plastic sheet on the ground, I can just read the book by a courtyard or wherever I want to. And it's basically just a revisit on I guess Mio's personality.
Well, for me, I feel like that that short story was very telling of Riki in particular. What really stands out to me is that this story illustrates how Riki his trauma is associated with rain. So whenever he hears or sees the rain, it brings him back to the day when his parents died and he was left all alone. I wish we saw this in some capacity, because I feel like this is new information that the story's been
Yeah.
withholding from us.
Well,
this
yes,
whole
it is
time.
completely new information.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't quite understand why is it connected to rain?
Well,
It must have happened on a rainy day.
Lots of
Yeah,
bad things happen on rainy days. And
yeah, I mean,
I believe it was a car accident. that,
Sad things in Key happen on rainy days. Yeah.
God damn it.
I remember there was I think Riki mentioned that it was the time when he was sitting all alone in the rain, and then Kyosuke reached out to him. Funny enough, in the anime adaptation, that scene wasn't in the rain, so god damn it.
Well, in the VN, they never mentioned it was in the rain either, so
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
But I like that this is a bit of introspection into the state of Riki's mind in the common route and how his trauma affects his daily life, because it's not something we see a lot of. He's pretty good at hiding it, but that trauma does have lasting effects on him. And yeah, I like that. It's a kind of punny situation here where the clear weather after the rain that Mio shows Riki is what gets him to cheer up.
Yeah.
If we assume that all of this happens after the whole event, then I think it's also somewhat telling of Ricky's lingering feelings for the rest of the girls.
Oh, and I'm pretty sure that's in common.
Is
Because
it?
he basically like recovers from his trauma after Refrain.
I mean, it's still there. It just doesn't turn into narcolepsy.
Yeah, I don't know. This is up for interpretation, but I read that and I was pretty confident that was in common when I read it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Anyway, why don't we talk about A Snowy Day?
Yay!
Here's the big one.
Yeah.
This is the one that was published twice.
Yes. Just too good to just include once. A Snowy Day is basically a epilogue to Mio's Route, which is like something I've wanted since forever. So I was pretty excited about it. It starts with Riki having a dream with Mio and Midori and himself just kind of like playing around. Midori is super ecchi as usual.
As always.
But yeah,
That
like
little vixen.
when you first read it, it's like it's winter and Mio and Midori are here. It's like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
But of course it's a dream. But
I immediately reacted to
what?
that.
Yeah, it's very I really like the atmosphere of this story because like when he wakes up, he's like he feels very sad. You know, he has like this feeling of nostalgia and longing for Midori that's been lost from his life, and he goes to talk about Mio. He goes to talk with Mio about it, and like they just have this moment of just like, you know, I needed to see you and tell you about this. It's like it's super romantic, guys. My
Yeah.
favorite ship. And you know, they just had this moment where like Mio's like, well, maybe it wasn't a dream. Maybe you just saw a parallel world, and like. It's a little bit goofy, but you know, it's the kind of story that like it really suits someone like Mio who's immerses herself in fiction and fictional worlds. It's like, yeah, this was written by Leo Kashida, by the way. It really plays into the whole like meta narrative of like what is reality, you know, what's real, you know, what may be real for Riki and Mio might not be the same in a different world where, you know, Midori exists instead of Mio. Like, it goes back to the whole like Everett's many worlds interpretation, which was referenced in Could, by the way.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just a nice atmospheric story that puts you back in the shoes of Mio, and it's good that she's been able to process all of this and, you know, move on. Like, she still misses Midori, but like it's not something that's like, you know, boo-hoo, I'm so sad. They've obviously like recovered from it, and they can imagine a better world in which, you know, or a different world in which they all live together somehow. It's cool. I like it.
And this takes
Right,
place.
and
This takes place.
Go
after
ahead.
Refrain, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
It wasn't
Yes.
explicitly stated, but it just
Yeah.
makes the most sense. Because like they're talking about the events of Mio's route as if they've already happened.
Yeah. So it's just.
And he does mention early summer,
Yeah.
the incident early summer.
Oh, true.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought it was really good that it made mention that that you know that whole part of her route isn't forgotten, sort of bit. Like.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
They've grown from it.
right, and the final there's a final message to this story, namely that just because we don't see certain things doesn't mean they're not there.
Yes.
And that is Mio's stance on this whole idea. Like, she can see Midori. Maybe Midori is in a parallel world that will never again intersect with hers.
Yeah.
But she knows that Midori is out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing I got from this is it gave a pretty good insight about how Midori came to be, because the dresser that she shows
Yeah,
up
yeah,
with,
yeah.
Yeah.
with the multiple mirrors, I think that's kind of very indicative of why she thought of Midori. Because, you know, that kind of dresser, if you've seen one before, has 3 separate mirrors, and all of them give a different angle of your face. So it's
Yeah,
kind of how it gives a different angle of yourself,
Hmm.
and how Mio might have thought of herself in a different angle and what she would be like in that case.
Which is basically Midori, yeah.
Yes.
Also, we should also mention that in this story, Midori is particularly happy about the prospect of making snowmen, and when they do start doing it, she's super happy about it. And I think that's a really beautiful metaphor on Midori's entire existence.
Yeah.
Because she is kind of like that snowman. Like you can have a lot of fun building snowmen and all, but at some point they're just going to melt.
A transient existence.
Very fleeting.
Yes.
Do you wanna build a snowman?
Oh God, no. Sorry.
Heartless.
So that's Mio After-Refrain. Let's talk about Kurigaya. We talked about this a little bit before, but obviously, like, there's stuff in the mechanics of the world. But
Okay, baboom.
yeah, God, where do we go from this? Like, Kurigaya is one that you can't fully appreciate until you understand the secret of the world, I think. And
Yes.
fortunately, if you were listening to our Kurigaya podcast, we did have people that figured it out really early. So they were able to appreciate Kurigaya's root in, its full. But we couldn't confirm or deny anything at the time, but... yeah.
Was it Magus Verborum we had on
Yeah.
the podcast back then?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was fun.
And Sante, yeah.
And the something. Oh,
And Mogoska,
Right.
shout out to him too.
no. Right. So, in case you didn't realize, that is why the whole world was repeating.
I think it should be obvious by now. Like, this is
Yeah, it should
basically
be
all
obvious,
just
but-
kind of like exposition for how the world works.
But
And
but,
how
like,
it can cause conflict for Kurigaya and Riki.
to try to answer that, I don't think we ever did. We mention this in the podcast. The reason why it was repeating.
Well, we couldn't confirm or deny anything, so...
Yeah. So I'd like to give my own take on it, because Kurigaya's regret, the reason why she was in the dream world, is because she could never connect with people. And if you ask me, Kurigaya's the character who didn't really need a root. She would have been able to get over her regrets by just being part of the Little Busters. I think
Yeah.
one of her regrets, if you that was also hinted at short story one, is that she never joined the silly group of Little Busters that she wanted to for so long. And now that she did, she was happy. But with that root came a feeling that she never expected to experience, which was love. And because she fell in love with Ricky, she didn't want to let go of that. She didn't want to say goodbye, and she didn't. I mean, even if her regret was already solved early on, and she does hint that in her root that I'm supposed to be gone already, and my regrets have already finished supposedly. But she was controlling the world at that point to repeat infinitely, just so
Yep.
she could spend more time with Ricky.
Her love
And
was
that
so
is
strong that it
very
broke the
bittersweet.
world.
That was very bittersweet.
Yeah.
It's an
And,
amazing...
It
uh,
also goes.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go now.
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. It also goes to show that sometimes the strongest people are actually the weakest deep inside, and those who seem the most mature sometimes have the most childish wishes. Like Kurugaya is exactly the same as Kengo.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
She seems so mature, so strong, undefeatable, but deep inside she just wants to keep playing around.
She just wants a
And
hug.
she goes
Yeah.
really far to accomplish that wish. Like, she is being pretty selfish.
Yeah, like, she's arguably the most selfish character in the cast, which is saying something. But yeah, like, what can you say about this? This is a freaking fantastic route, and I really encourage you guys, if this was your first time reading Little Busters, go back and reread that route, especially if you hadn't figured everything out before this first read through. Like, you'll appreciate it so much more. It's just this bittersweet tale of a love that she didn't want to give up on, even as the world was ending around her.
And this is why I hate the anime so much. I'm sorry.
Go on.
I was if you've also watched the anime, they removed all notion of romance here. Well, not all notion, but I mean
they did definitely
don't-
mellow out the romance quite a bit.
Yeah,
They made it
and
more one-sided, I guess.
This hurts me a lot because everything I believe about in the Kurigaya route is because of her undying love for Ricky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
gone. I'm so sad.
That happens to a lot of roots. Like, people call Little Busters a story about friendship, but there's a lot of love stuff in this, and you take out the love and the roots
Yeah.
become damaged. I've
Yeah,
talked about this a lot
totally.
on the different podcasts.
Not all of them. Well,
Kud's root doesn't make any sense without romance. Mio's
Yeah.
root is like really weak without romance. It's just.
Komari's is fine without it, if you ask me.
I think
But-
Kamari, Kamari is one that does okay without it. But yeah, a lot of the roots suffer. Anyway, let's not drag on that point. There was, in fact, content added after you finish Refrain. A little extra ending and CG you get, where basically in the real world, Kurigaya receives a text message, and you can choose to recognize it. If you don't recognize it, you get the bad ending. If you do, you get this ending where she recognizes it as a message from Riki, and this is supposedly after the events of Refrain, when she's already woken up, and she's like, "Oh, Riki actually remembers me." And so it's kind of like you basically get to choose whether or not the characters remember what happened in Kurigaya's route or not. And if they do remember, then you get a scene where Kurigaya confesses her feelings to Riki, and it basically just ends there.
Yeah, it's like a few extra lines.
Yeah, it's
And
like
this,
it's not
my
long.
friends. This, my friends, is why I continue to this day to ship Ricky and Kurugaya.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ricky X Rin fans. I will forever be Ricky X Kurugaya.
Yeah. I mean, like, the scene was taking place in, I think it said, like, several seasons later. It
yes.
said something about
Oh
seasons.
yeah.
Right,
in
it
the
was in
autumn.
a different season.
Which makes me think
Was
that,
it autumn?
it is in the real world.
Well, we can only hope.
Actually, about that, one of our members, Takafumi, has written an extensive blog entry on his personal blog
Oh, yes.
explaining everything about Kurugaya's true ending. And there's a lot of stuff to it. Like, most
I
people
didn't
would
know
never
about
have
this.
realized this.
He
Like,
is,
he really
yeah.
deciphered it. He looked into the metaphors, like watching stuff from behind a glass panel, unable to reach them.
Yeah, like the
Basically,
dreams.
I recommend everyone to go to Takafumi's blog and read that.
Yeah, I haven't
Can you
read
link
this.
that?
Yeah,
You should link that.
I'm gonna give me a link and I'll include it with the podcast. I'll put it in the description. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna check that out.
Totally.
Unfortunately, I haven't read it yet, so I can't comment.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Kurigaya is awesome. Haruka is probably the route which changes the least after Refrain and knowing everything. Because Haruka is definitely not a character which knows the secret of the world, and she's not a character which is affected by the secret of the world. Like, all of the conflict in her route is very grounded in reality and stuff that could have happened in the real world. With one exception being Kanata. If you go to the bad end where Haruka does something unpleasant, you get this scene where Kanata is like blaming you, and like, I can't remember the exact wording, but the way it's said very strongly implies that like she knows that this is like a time loop, and she's like, you know, don't do this again. Like, I think she says stay away from Haruka next time, I think is what she says, something like that.
Yeah.
It's
Very spooky.
one very confusing thing for most readers after they realize the nature of Refrain is what the hell is Kanata, right? Because
Yeah.
she is not supposed to be on that bus ride. She is not supposed to be one of those dreamers. So makes you wonder why she acts the way she does if she really is an NPC, and the kind of control that she has over the world.
There's no way she could be an NPC, not with the way she's behaving.
Yes,
Yeah, true
yes. I would like to pause my thoughts here because I have already read Kanata Root, and anything I say will have been influenced by
Yeah.
that.
Please look forward to the Kanata podcast coming soon. We'll get into this later. Other than that, I don't think there's really much we can say about Haruka. Anything else you guys want to mention? I can't think of anything.
Well, she pops up in Kud's different ending, right?
Yes. So if we talk about Kud Root now, there's okay. So
That's the big one.
there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
Like I think we already kind of went into it. We went into it in vague detail how we believed that the ending of Kud Root was a metaphor. It wasn't like literal because of all the impossible stuff happening. And
Yeah.
now that you know the secret of the world, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so please stop pushing the idea that couldn't have ever escaped from that dungeon.
That's what I thought originally.
That's a Deus Ex Machina. I hate
God.
that. I'm sorry. I'm so bitter about people who go to
It's
that point.
okay. It's okay.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of content that gets added to Kud's route after you complete Refrain, more than any other route. It feels to me like Shirakiri, when she was writing this route, like she was just so filled with inspiration and ideas that she couldn't just leave it at that after finishing Kud's route on in Vanilla Little Bus. It's like she had to
Right.
keep writing, and that's when we
Right.
get this extra ending for the Kud route, which is actually quite lengthy. Like I think it goes for like you can get through it in about half an hour if you're fast, but that's still a decent chunk of content considering like
Yeah.
we get like 10 lines for Kurugaya. And this ending does many things for the story. It basically reframes the entire conflict of Kud's route as like a emotional conflict as opposed to a supernatural one. It takes away all the metaphors and just scrapes it back to its bare minimum of Kud is feeling conflicted about her feelings. Naoki, you made some great posts about this, so I want you to take the wheel for this.
Right. So basically, after you finish Refrain and go back to Kud's route, then at the point where Riki is to decide whether Kud should stay or go, there a third option appears. And that third option leads to an alternative ending, which I think is something that's supposed to make all complainers shut up. Because what it does is addressing the same conflict that Kud is going through, but in a different way. It addresses Kud's conflict, the problem she has to face, the regret she has to face, but without using the mechanics of the world, without sending this little child to war and have her captured and detained in a cave. They address it differently. They, first of all, Riki's choice is to let Kud decide what to do. And after struggling with that choice, she finally decides to stay in Japan after all. And then in Japan, she goes through all this, trying to deal with this problem. And she's not doing particularly well with it because, for one thing, there's obviously the guilt of abandoning her mother, the guilt of not doing her duty, basically all the stuff that made her turn this whole thing into a dying regret for her.
Right.
Right. So she.
If I'd like to point out one thing that I did not realize about Little Busters after I finish it is that at this point, Kud's mom has already passed away.
Oh,
And hooking that into her regret is exactly that, not being able to do her duty.
Didn't they
Right.
change this in the anime?
I thought so.
I think they kept her alive in the anime.
Yeah, I think so.
Eh,
Yeah,
They did.
That's what confused me because I watched the anime and then played the EX roots because I played the original and I was like, she's dead, and then I'm like, wait a minute, what did they change it in the game too? And I'm like,
well,
oh.
I don't think they act. Well, I don't know. I don't remember the anime well enough. Anyway, continue, Naoki.
By the way, now that we have touched upon the topic of the death of Kut's mother, whose name is Chernushka, by the way, I don't quite remember who said it, whether it was Komari, maybe it was Haruka. Anyway, in this alternative route, someone said that they remember Kut clutching that broken metal part when she sat in the bus. It was just a really short line.
What?
Right.
I remember this.
Yep. Wait, I'm trying to find it in my notes.
I vaguely remember that. I think it was.
I didn't catch that.
It was Komari.
Yeah.
To quote, "It's something Ku-chan has always cherished. When we were riding the bus, I saw her clinging to that the entire time."
Okay.
That
Damn.
is- that's heavy stuff.
Wow.
Very heavy stuff.
Yeah,
So, just a second. Anyway.
No, go on.
So I think basically the gist of this is her regret was basically not being able to be there for her mother, and I think what we've learned from Kudroot is that wasn't important, right?
Well, it is. Like, I think her regret is running away. Where she just couldn't accept this this thing that had happened. And then she goes there and then she tortures herself and then that doesn't get solved either. So it's like, I think the message at the end of the day is to accept regret and let it, just let it be. Just keep moving forward. Yeah.
Yes, but it's also about accepting yourself. Basically,
Yes.
everything about Kud's problems is interconnected. Everything is somehow connected to her regret. On one hand, we have Kud's mother, who is a role model for her, the person everyone admires, the person she wants to become, and that she fails to become. On the other hand, we have Riki, who is the only person who accepted Kud as she was.
And
And then
not
at some point, Kud had to make a decision between visiting her mother and putting her own life at risk, or staying with Riki, who basically is on the same level, or maybe, yeah, I guess he was on a slightly higher level because she did end up deciding to stay with Riki and then regretting not going back to her home country after all.
There's a lot of, in this ending, there's a lot of like conflict around the lack of communication between Kud and Riki. How basically
Right.
Kud just tells her to decide for herself and she takes that as, oh, like I'll just, I won't depend on you anymore. I'll just do everything myself. And that's when Riki realizes that he needs to, I suppose, have a more active role in the life of his girlfriend.
Yes, because after all,
Put it bluntly.
she can't deal with this regret herself. I think there were hints in this alternative route that Kud has already gone through a loop where she went back to her country. She was imprisoned in that dark cave and she died there, but it didn't clear her regret.
Right.
So she came back not knowing why. She talked with Kyosuke about this,
Yeah.
but they never found out. Because her regret is not that she didn't punish herself appropriately.
Yeah.
Her
Yeah,
regret,
she-
after all, is that she never found someone who would truly appreciate her and tell her, like outright tell her, that it's fine to do what you want to do, including her own dream. Because there is also a part in this route where she decides to give up on becoming a cosmonaut and looking for alternatives because she gave up on her mother.
She's trying to throw away her regrets. And the whole point of this ending is Riki trying to communicate to her that regrets aren't something you just throw away. You don't just like start from zero. Like you take those regrets and you take them into the future. Like you don't just throw them away. You consider them, but you don't let them end everything for you, because there's no reason to just give up on your dreams just because something bad happened, you know?
Right.
I like to think that this route was written as a response to the criticism of the Could route, because this is exactly the same problem that Could had in her route. It's just that the solution changes, and the solution becomes a more realistically grounded one. You know, but it's also something that couldn't have happened in the whole grander narrative of Little Busters.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. I love how there's all these lines about like even if it's like you're locked in chains. Could, like he says that, like it's like you're burdened with this responsibility you feel towards yourself and this guilt. It's like shackled you in chains. And there's also talks about how like even if we're separated by an ocean, my feelings will still reach you. Like it's all very not subtly saying that like this is the same thing as the normal ending.
Like, you are in the dungeon right now. They're just not showing it, and you're just not showing a CG.
Yeah. And the CG does flash across the screen too, just to hammer that in. It's just a different way of framing the conflict, basically.
One more thing. Aspi, you wrote a post about the extra ending where you were asking what exactly did Could want to show Riki?
Yes. At the very end, she's just like, when I go back there, I think she says, I want to show you something. It was in quotation marks, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, go back where exactly? Is she talking about Tevoa? Is she talking about the real world? Like, what do you guys make of this? What do you make of this now?
Well, I'm pretty sure she's talking about her mother's DVD. Because watching the DVD is an event that happens post-refrain in the real world.
Yes.
Kudiavka was already in possession of that DVD, but she simply didn't have the courage to watch it.
Man, there's a lot to this. Let me unpack this step by step. The vanilla Little Busters Could route ended with Could returning back from Tevoa. In the EX/English edition release, it ends with this DVD scene. And at the time, we don't know that scene is actually taking place in the real world. But if you go back to Cood's route after finishing Refrain and you do the true ending again, you get a bonus scene which is set after the credits and before the DVD scene, which is basically Cood at the end of the world. Can we talk about this for a second before we jump ahead to the DVD scene?
Okay.
Yeah, so like this is a scene where Cood is basically, she's fully aware of the state of the world and what's going to happen to her. She knows her route is about to reset and Riki will forget everything. And a voice asks, are you okay with this? And she says, da, wasn't it? Yeah, she's speaking Russian. And one thing that's very interesting about this that Helios pointed out is that he doesn't think that's Kyosuke talking to her. He thinks that's Kanata.
Oh.
And I wish he was on voice right now so we could talk about it.
He is on voice right now. Wink, wink.
He's in the audience. Helios, I'm looking at you. Kanata understands Russian. It's not something she would be saying to someone like Kyosuke who has no knowledge of the language. And also the way that it's spoken, the speech pattern isn't Kyosuke. Because usually Kyosuke would say inoka, but in the Japanese it's iino with a question mark, which suggests a more feminine speaking pattern. It definitely like lends credence to the theory that this is Kanata speaking and not Kyosuke, which is very weird, especially since we haven't read EX yet.
For sure.
That Kanata's the one here instead of Kyosuke. We might talk about that more at a later point when we've done Kanata's route, but I just wanted to point that out as a interesting curiosity that English speakers probably wouldn't have picked up on. And so what else is cool about this scene is that it's the first time in the story that we see, like, Kurigaya kind of plays into it a little bit, but this is the first time it's gone really meta about the secret of the world and a heroine's reaction to it. You know, that Riki is going to forget his feelings and go and fall in love with another girl probably. And this is Kud saying, you know, it's okay, I know it was like, in the grand scheme of things, it was all one-sided, and I accept it. But then she says at the very end that her regret has changed, and that now it's become a wish for, instead of becoming a cosmonaut because she knows she's going to die, her wish becomes for Rin and Riki to get out of this world and survive, which is pretty damn beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I feel like this was transplanted and chucked into Kurigaya in the anime. Like, basically the same thing happens there, where Kurigaya is like, you know, make sure you take Rin and get out of here at the very end of the route. Yeah. So it's kind of like repurposed there. But yeah, like, this is a scene that 99% of people aren't going to see unless you like really comb through the game. But I really wanted to point it out here. It's such a good scene. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's
I
like
didn't
really
even know
sad.
it was there.
Yeah, it's really sad. I reminded you guys in podcast chat to make sure you read this scene. You
Yeah.
didn't read it.
I thought I read it, but
I read
when
it.
you talk about it now, I don't remember I read it.
Yeah.
Or maybe I did. I just have very bad memory.
And
But
so,
if this screenshot of Naoki is from that scene, then I
Yes.
believe I did read it. Yes,
okay.
I did.
Yeah. But so basically this scene happens and then it cuts to like Kud saying proshaite, which is, as we mentioned in the Kud podcast, farewell. It's something to say to someone you don't think you're ever going to see again. And it ends with that. And then we cut to the scene of the DVD. So it's like a ray of light, because now we're in the real world and Kud survived and she's able to process her regrets by showing Riki the thing she wanted to show him, and that's the DVD. And yeah, that just makes Kud route so much better.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
nice
it's like this route was really written like post. It almost feels like it would be better as an EX route, but it happened to be part of the vanilla of the
Yeah.
buster, so they couldn't spoil everything. Though part of me does appreciate the mystery aspect of it and figuring it all out.
Yeah, I wonder if they had all this writing left and they're like, hey, let's make a Kud laughter.
Well-
We don't talk about that. Kudwafter doesn't count towards anything.
If only it did.
God damn. Okay, where are we now?
It's okay. Could has Masato.
I also wanted to mention that Shirakiri isn't done with Kud yet. There is still a short story called Stars Far Away, which served as an epilogue for Kud, Haruka, and Kanata's roots all at once, and it's really cool, but we're not going to talk about it today because that would entail Kanata spoilers, so we're going to leave that one for the Kanata podcast.
God damn it! I wanted to talk about it.
I'll leave you hanging on that one for now.
Maybe next time.
Yeah. Anyway, so going on to Rin, obviously, like, we've talked a lot about Rin with respect to Refrain in the last podcast, so there's not really a lot more to talk about. However, there was an additional scene added to the game after you finish Refrain. And it's fan service. Who would have thought?
Well, actually,
it's
I
not-
would argue that this is not, in fact, the Rin EX content, but instead this is Masato EX content.
What?
Because it's the day Masato returns from hospital.
Nani?
Well, the first change happens before just before the it's not enough choice. You have the scene in the hospital where like Rin asks, "Is that a proposal?" And you can say yes, it is. It gives you the option. And so that if you choose yes, then that will give you an additional like CG at the end. I think was it a CG or was it just like a scene? I think it was just a scene where like basically
Just a scene.
Rin and Riki are just making out in the classroom for a while.
Yeah.
It's sweet.
Lots of
like,
lewd hands holding.
it's sweet.
Dude,
Like,
hand holding.
it could have been a lot worse. But yeah, like it's just basically for the Rin fans to give them
It's
something.
basically a story of Rin confessing to Ricky.
Yeah, a resolution of that
They're
unresolved
like,
romance.
here, it's believable now.
Well, we've talked about all the heroines, so I guess like a couple of other things we have to talk about are Bokuro no Asa, Our Morning, which is a short story / drama CD that was released for Little Busters, which is basically detailing the field trip that they go on after the end of Refrain to the beach. They rent out the van and basically takes off from the credits, which is very cool. The story itself is pretty fluffy. It doesn't go into too much crazy stuff, but it's just great to see the Little Busters, having fun after that whole incident. And then, of course, there's a scene at the end on the beach with Riki having his doubts over whether it's the real world or not, and Kyosuke homos it up. Anybody else want to talk about this?
I just want to say how Kyosuke is. No matter what happens, Kyosuke is still Kyosuke.
Yeah.
In a way, he is the most one-dimensional character because he doesn't grow much, but he doesn't need to. He's perfect as he is.
Like,
God damn it.
basically, it's just like, Kyosuke, I don't know if this is the real world or not. It's like, Riki, take my hand. They just jump into the ocean. It's freezing cold. It's like, sir, are you sure you're in a dream now? And then Riki just cries. Oh dear. Happy cries, but yes. It's a big one for the Kyoriki shippers, nonetheless.
I was also one of the persons who was kind of teetering on the possibility that everything after Refrain is still in a dream world, because I mean, if they can make a new dream world after going to that quote-unquote hospital, what's to say that everything else isn't a dream? Oh. But this kind of debunked it, you know.
Well, it's kind of like, it goes back to the whole Mio thing where we don't know anything's real, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, like,
You know.
and it doesn't. Ricky also says that he doesn't have narcolepsy there either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of funny how it's like, it's too good to be true. It mustn't
Yeah.
be real. Which might be a nod to the people who thought it was too happy an ending.
Well, it is the power of friendship that makes impossible things possible.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey.
And the power of baseball, if we remember
Baseball.
the last podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also don't.
Because if everyone died, they'd have no one to play baseball with.
Oh yeah, so I also don't really think that they were trying to say that it's a dream, because it's just, if they were trying to go for that kind of thing, I think they would have had more kind of interactions that would play against that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I definitely. I'm willing to believe Kyosuke here. I don't see any
Yeah.
reason not to.
yeah, it's
Just
not like it's
don't like, take your blessings for granted, basically, I think is the moral
Yeah.
of this story. Just like enjoy it. Even if it is a dream, just enjoy it while it lasts, right? Because we're all gonna die eventually, right?
yeah.
I have such a dark way of putting things, but enjoy it while it lasts. Jump in the ocean, who cares? It's youth. gosh.
Seishunte.
And there was also like
Yeah.
this great thing here, which will tie into the next thing we're going to talk about, where Kyosuke fully acknowledges that the litter buses aren't his anymore. Like, Riki has been running them for the last year. He brought them together in a refrain. Like, it's his litter busters now. And I
Right.
think,
He recruited everyone, he solved everyone's problems, and then he friggin' saved everyone's lives.
yeah,
Him and Rin, by the way.
yeah.
I will push
Yeah.
that.
But Rin's not the leader. She's just.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think Little Busters even has a leader at this point. I like to think of it as a very self-organizing team, you know? Everyone does everything everyone does their own thing for the team, and they just end up blending together. I think more than a leader, I think Ricky's the mixer. The mixer. That didn't come out right. He's the one who's able to take everyone's chaos and mix it into something, you know, that actually happens.
That's an interesting way of putting it. But then we have one more thing to talk about, which is the to him who went on a journey for who knows why, the final after story from Refrain.
The best one, by the way.
Yes, holy crap. This is basically, it's like if they just wanted to do another crazy mission, but set after Refrain and after Bookclub no Asa. And this is like a sports festival. Hey, they're actually doing something part of the school curriculum for once. Holy crap. And, you know, there's this thing where it's like, oh, we probably can't participate because the disciplinary council or whatever will be on our ass. But then Kanata's like, it's fine, just do it. So it's like, this might be like referencing like events in Kanata, but I don't know. I can hand wave that as like she developed after Haruka's route as well.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see Kanata just being cool with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe she's not as evil as we think.
Yeah. and so
now-
they get.
Oh,
Grooven?
sorry. I was just gonna say all of the pictures from this make sense from the art book now. I had no idea really what they were showing.
Right,
So I'm
yeah.
like, why is Kyosuke on top?
Yeah.
Because it actually happens.
Yeah.
And why is Ricky blushing so heavily?
There's a funny story. There's a funny story here where, like, well, remember when we built the Little Busters school in Minecraft?
Yeah.
Sometimes we just fuck around in that. And I remember one day, like, Bonecuss, I think it might have been me or Bonecuss, like, one of us was in a Kyosuke skin on Minecraft, and he basically spawned a horse, and he was just, like, riding the horse through the school, and we're just like, this is so stupid. It's just like, this is totally something Kyosuke would actually do, and all that's like, the running joke became my favorite part of Little Busters was when Kyosuke rode the horse through the school. And then I read this and I'm like, wait, this actually happened! Holy crap! I had no idea!
So everything that you think Kyosuke would be capable of doing is something that he probably already did.
Yeah. He's like the man of infinite possibilities. But yeah, like, so the basic plot is that Kyosuke is away on a business trip and Riki has to organize this team to do a sports event, and like the event is like jousting, and ends up a mysterious Team X appears on the rankings, and they're like, wait a second, isn't this just like something Kyosuke would do? And they check a
Yeah.
photo that
he comes
Kyosuke
up.
sent them, and it's like, this is obviously fake. He is not in Los Angeles. That's a Japanese sign. And then it's just like Kyosuke appears on a horse on a mask. It's like, we know it's you, Kyosuke. It's like, what are you talking about? I'm not Kyosuke.
Yeah, this time they definitely knew.
Aren't
We
you
know
ashamed
it's-
of yourself of accusing myself as that Kyosuke guy? Isn't that awful to point their finger to a stranger like me?
Does he have like a rose in his mouth too?
He has a rose in
Yes.
his mouth.
That's why he looks so dashing, and that's probably why Riki's blushing.
And then there's this amazing mission where the whole of the Little Busters team up to take down Kyosuke on his horse. And it's absolutely
And his
amazing.
horse.
I feel like this might even be better than the kick the can scene, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah, it is.
Like-
This kind of paints what Kyosuke's actual role is in the Little Busters after everyone graduated.
He's the antagonist that they have to defeat.
Well, not quite, but he is the guy who turns a fun activity into something crazy fun, you know? And that's what Little Busters is all
And we're just like, but he can't win. Like, he hasn't been here the whole festival. It's like, if I win, I get 300 points. It's like, what? It's like, yep, the council permitted it.
Yes.
It's like, oh my god, Kyosuke.
The chairwoman was a Kyosuke fan.
Yeah.
I'm betting the chairwoman was Achan Senpai.
I don't think it was, because she was earlier in the story.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. But either way, like, just Kyosuke's influence extending anywhere he wants. This kind of feels like, you know, his final big act before he graduates too. So it's like, it's very, it works really well as like a final mission. Honestly, I would have loved this in the base game. Like, imagine if like they did the credits and then this happened.
Oh yeah.
It'd be amazing.
Or if they did an OVA or something.
Yeah, I would love to see
I
this
would
animated.
pay for the OVA
Holy
of
crap.
this,
Yeah.
Because like everyone uses their unique skills to like try and take Kyosuke down, but they all end up failing. And it's up to Riki, Haruka, and was it Kenga? No, who
Yes,
was it?
Kenga.
Yeah.
I think it was Kenga.
Well,
Kenga was really into it. Holy crap.
Oh, yes. He wrestled the horse. What the hell?
But my favorite part of all this is how like Haruka's like, oh no, my marbles were confiscated by Kanata, so I can't use my special attack to trip the horse. And then Kanata just comes out running and throws her marbles. I'm like, oh my god. Makes me so happy.
Don't be stupid. I just want to put an end to this foolish game already. My favorite part of this was Kud actually becoming a cosmonaut.
Oh yeah, she turned into a rocket.
Yeah,
Rocket number 13.
but classic cosmonaut, she didn't think about the landing.
Oh, burn.
Oh.
See, this would be amazing animated. Holy crap. Why isn't it happening?
Damn it.
This deserves an OVA.
Petition to the JC stuff.
Yeah, do this instead of
let's make a
Kudo
Kickstarter.
please.
This is what I gave my money for.
Oh my god. And we basically spoiled the whole story, so I hope people who are listening to this, like, haven't read it yet. God. Either way, go read it, it's amazing.
Yeah. Comes with the book next.
So, I guess, like, that's most of the stuff we wanted to talk about for this podcast. It's a very, all over the place kind of discussion, but yeah, I really wanted to get all of this out of the way before we move on to EX routes. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about Saya and Sasami and I guess Kanata.
Kanata is the best part.
Okay. Well, I really don't remember much about Kanata. I must have been in a bad mood when I read it, so I'm going to need to reread that again. But I've got plenty to say about Sasami and Saya, so hopefully I'll have a lot to say about Kanata too. Oh, goodness. Any last thoughts before we wrap this podcast up, guys?
Kyosuke on a horse.
Kyosuke on a horse. I think that says it all. Thanks for joining, guys, and we'll see you for the next podcast. Bye-bye!
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.